Welcome to this webinar on the CDFI Fund's request for public comments on the annual certification and data collection report and the certification transaction level report. I'm Greg Bishak, the Program Manager of Financial Strategies and Research at the CDFI Fund. And today I'm joined by two of my colleagues in the Financial Strategies and Research Unit, Oscar Gonzalez, the Associate Program Manager, and Shannon McKay, the Lead Research Analyst for the Annual Certification Report. We will be tag teaming on this presentation, which gives you an overview of the request for public comment. Next slide, please. The CDFI Fund is soliciting public comment on the proposed changes to the Annual Certification and Data Collection Report, which for short we'll call the ACR, and the new Certification Transaction Level Report, which we'll note as the CTLR. The revisions to the ACR and the introduction of the CTLR are being made to align with and to conform to revisions proposed to the CDFI Fund's certification application. I'll note that the revisions to the certification application is a result of the CDFI Fund's certification policies and procedures, which are proposed to strengthen the primary community development test for applicants who want to achieve CDFI certification, and to ensure that whoever applies is engaging in responsible financing practices. Further, we want to standardize and improve the reporting on lending and services to distressed communities and underserved populations. These changes in the certification policies are affecting the application. The proposed revisions to the ACR, however, are also anticipated to automate key elements of the existing reporting process and to improve the overall data quality. The introduction of the CTLR will provide critical data that will help automate the process and also provide information that is not currently collected on the current CDFI application for certification. The revised one, however, will utilize the CTLR for new applicants, and also the CTLR will be used by certified CDFIs that are not financial assistance recipients through the CDFI program for financial assistance. The process of requesting public comment is something that's required by federal law, and the Office of Management and Budget requires us to solicit these comments. And we just want to provide you a little high-level summary of what some of the key areas of comments that we're inviting. And these are noted in the Federal Register publication, which is found in the link on our website that accompanies this presentation. First area really is whether the collection of information in the view of commenters is necessary for the proper performance of the functions of the CDFI Fund and its programs, whether the information has practical utility. The other one is the accuracy of the CDFI Fund's estimate of the burden of collecting this information, the burden principally on those who would have to respond, the applicants, and then the certified CDFIs in this instance. Another area that we're soliciting comments is to enhance how this might enhance the quality, utility, and clarity of the information that we need to collect. And then further, on this very point, we'd like to solicit, particularly from those who have been certified CDFIs, but also applicants, a sense of what profile of the organization in its financial products, services, asset size, target market served would be most beneficial for the public generally to have as a snapshot so that they can understand what CDFIs do, and that we could publish such concise little summaries on our website. We want to know your input on that. What would be relevant in your view? Additionally, we'd like to figure out how to minimize the burden of the collection of this data. We think that some of the advances in the technologies of the CTLR help do that. Further, there's a very important issue. If we add to the data collection, we want to make sure that the reporting period for submitting an annual certification report for certified CDFIs, which currently is 90 days after the fiscal year end of the reporting organization fiscal year, if that's an adequate amount of time given the volume of this information, we want comments on this. And then finally, we want to understand the cost of implementing and maintaining such a data collection system. With that, let's turn to the next slide, which will give us an overview of the presentation as a whole and some of the key things that we're going to be examining. We want to give you a little bit of information for those who aren't totally familiar with the CDFI Fund, its programs, and what CDFIs or community development financial institutions are. Next slide, please. Our mission at the CDFI Fund is to expand economic opportunity for underserved people and communities by supporting the growth and capacity of a national network of community development lenders, investors, and financial services providers. Next slide, please. Our vision is a CDFI fund that can provide America and its people, particularly distressed communities and underserved communities, to have access to investment capital and financial services that they need to prosper. Next slide, please. Okay. Let me give you a little bit of an overview about the CDFI Fund and its programs. The CDFI Fund manages 6 separate programs authorized through 4 different statutes. The landmark legislation to found the CDFI Fund was the Regal Community Development and Regulatory Improvement Act, which was passed back in 1994. It actually enabled 3 different programs at the CDFI Fund: the Bank Enterprise, our flagship and our namesake, the Community Development Financial Institutions Program, and also the Native American CDFI Assistance Program. We have 3 other relevant acts: the Community Renewal Tax Relief Acts, which founded the New Markets Tax Credit Program, the Housing and Economic Recovery Act, which founded the Capital Magnet Fund, and the Small Business Jobs Act, which founded the Bond Guarantee Program. Next slide, please. Next, we'll turn to an examination briefly of what CDFI certification entails. Next slide. Some may want to know what a CDFI or a community development financial institution is. CDFIs are community-based organizations that expand economic opportunity in low-income communities. These are principally those with high poverty rates, high unemployment rates, and low median family income, and also to provide financial products and services to individuals and businesses often underserved by traditional financial institutions. In other words, they're communities that are targeted, usually in low-income census tracts, and then there are groups of individuals that are traditionally underserved by mainstream financial institutions. Next, CDFIs aim to help families finance their first homes, support small businesses and startup businesses, rebuild credit histories and establish credit, invest in local community infrastructure such as health, education, community facilities, as well as to provide financial services and development services to avail consumers and businesses of information about affordable and responsible lending products and services. CDFIs include diverse types of institutions, including regulated banks, credit unions, and also loan funds, community loan funds, and venture capital funds that are not regulated by mainstream regulatory agencies. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. CDFI certification. To become certified, an organization must submit a CDFI application to the CDFI fund for review and approval. And that is exactly one of the main data collections, which is being revised in concert with the annual certification report and the CTLR, which is the certification application. In it, applicants must demonstrate that they meet the following requirements. First, that they be a legal entity at the time of certification application. Second, that they have a primary mission of promoting community development. Third, that they're a financing entity. Banks and credit unions are de facto, but loan funds and venture funds have to demonstrate this. Fourth, that they primarily serve one or more target markets, and these take two characteristic types, either distressed communities in areas of the country that often are high poverty and high unemployment, and populations that are often underserved by mainstream financial institutions. Next, entities seeking CDFI certification must provide development services in conjunction with financing activities. And these development services are training about affordable products or responsible products to ensure that the consumer and the businesses have the capacity to repay and that they're getting low-cost, efficient products to meet their needs. Next, applicants must maintain their accountability to these defined target markets. And finally, applicants must not be under control of a government entity. In other words, they must be a non-governmental entity. The tribal governments are excluded in the case of the NACA or Native American applicants. Next slide, please. I'll now turn the presentation over to Shannon McKay to discuss the annual certification data collection report and provide an overview of the changes. Shannon?
Thanks, Greg. Hi, everyone. My name is Shannon McKay, and I'm a research analyst at the CDFI Fund. And my portfolio includes the annual certification and data collection report. For this portion of the presentation, I will be giving an overview of the annual certification and data collection report and discussing the specific changes that we have proposed and put forth for public comment. Next slide. The annual certification and data collection report, also known as the ACR, has two major purposes. First, it is used to ensure that certified CDFIs are meeting the necessary requirements for continuing certification. And second, the data collected allows the CDFI Fund to gain insight on the CDFI industry. Certified CDFIs are required to submit their ACR on an annual basis through the CDFI Fund's Awards Management Information System, also known as AMIS. Currently, ACRs are due within 90 days of the end of a CDFI's fiscal year. Failure to submit a required ACR may result in a loss of certification status. And for those program recipients, they may face additional sanctions if they fail to submit their ACR. Newly certified CDFIs are not required to submit an ACR until the next fiscal year after their initial certification. So for example, if a CDFI is certified in 2019, they would submit their first ACR in 2021. Whereas CDFIs who are certified this year in 2020, they would submit their first ACR in 2022. Next slide. The ACR collects data from certified CDFIs via four major sections. First section, organizational information, asks organizations to enter information about their lines of business, governance structure, staffing levels, and details related to the 7 requirements for certification that Greg went over earlier. Some data fields are populated from information already stored in the CDFI organizational profile in AMIS. So please be sure to keep your organization's profile up to date because this impacts the quality of data that's collected through the ACR. Second, financial data detail section asks organizations to provide key financial information from either audited or unaudited financial statements on assets, liabilities, income, expenses, and their loan and investment portfolio. Third section, financial products portfolio breakdown detail, asks for more specific information about the financial products the CDFI engages with. And these fall into three major types of loans, loan guarantees, and equity investments. Each CDFI has to report data for at least one financial product before they can submit their ACR. And we are asked about the different subtypes provided of these products, whether they're being used for business financing, residential real estate financing, for example. The total number of products, the dollar amount, and how much the activity is taking place in your designated target market. The fourth section, development services detail, is very similar to the financial products portfolio detail section, but the focus is on development services. CDFIs must report data for at least one development service before you can submit your ACR. And development services include credit counseling, homeownership counseling, and business technical assistance are a few examples. And again, we ask which financial product is associated with this development service, as well as how many total clients are served by each development service and what subset is in your target market. So that completes the overview of the current ACR. We'll turn next to the proposed changes to the ACR. Next slide. Later this spring, CDFI Fund will be issuing a public comment on proposed revisions to the ACR. As Greg mentioned earlier, these revisions are being proposed in order to align the ACR with proposed changes to the revised CDFI certification application. We are also introducing a new data collection instrument to the ACR called the Certification Transaction Level Report, CTLR for short. Oscar will be discussing the CTLR more in depth later in the presentation. Comments are due to the CDFI Fund 60 days from the date of publication of the request for public comments in the Federal Register. And just a reminder that certified CDFIs are subject to the existing ACR reporting requirements until further notice. Next slide. We'll start by previewing the proposed deletions to the current ACR data points. The collection of transactional data through the CTLR will permit the deletion of several data points in the current version of the ACR. And these include primary and secondary lines of business from the organizational information section, as well as target market attestation questions from the organizational information section. The number and dollar amount of loans or equity investments deployed to target market, which can be found currently in the financial data section. The number and dollar amount of loan portfolio deployed to the target market, which is found in the financial products portfolio breakdown section. All of these data points will be deleted because they will be replaced by data on new originations and target market deployment data collected and calculated through the CTLR. We will also be reducing the number of financial data fields that regulated financial institutions answer because we will be employing web services to acquire financial data from call reports by regulated institutions. This technological advancement should improve data quality and automate key elements of ACR reporting. Next slide. Turning to the proposed additions to the ACR, the additions would affect two sections, organizational detail and financial data sections. For the organizational detail section, we are proposing to add 4 questions. First, a legal entity criteria question, which is only applicable to the regulated entities. It asks whether they are still being regulated by the same entity as when their certification was approved, as well as the same deposit insurance provider. The second question is around the primary mission test question, and it focuses on the community development strategy. Specifically, is the CDFI pursuing the same community development strategy as when it was last certified? And this question, the certification requirement is important because this year will be when it's added, it will apply both to subsidiaries as well as affiliates when you're answering this question. The third question will be around the primary mission test and asking questions around responsible practices. As part of the proposed revised CDFI certification applications, CDFI should provide financial products and financial services in a way that does not harm consumers. Financial products should be affordable and based upon the borrower's ability to repay, and CDFI should practice transparency, fair collections, and be in compliance with federal, state, and local laws and regulations. To measure compliance with these principles, the ACR will ask a series of questions related to the CDFI's financial products and financial services, including questions on the annualized rate of interest and other fees charged to a borrower. The fourth question added will be around the accountability criteria, which is only applicable to credit unions. And the question will ask, is there a change to the percentage of credit union membership that has been approved to use the special accountability provision? Moving on to the new data tables that are proposed in the financial data section. There are three ones that we have proposed. The first captures sources of investment capital. How are CDFIs capitalizing themselves? What is the amount of capital and source for each amount of capital, as well as the interest rate and maturity date? And this data table is going to be modeled after the discontinued institutional level report, ILR, and will document sources of capitalization. The second new data table is called the Contributing Operating Revenue Table. How are CDFIs managing their operating revenues? What is the amount of the revenue, and what is the source and donor for the revenue? And the third table, Loans and Leases Table, is gathering important data on the average rate, total number, and amount of loans and lines of credit provided by certified CDFIs and applicants. For regulated institutions, this data will be extracted from the regulator's institutional data via web services. That concludes the overview of the ACR and its proposed changes. I will now turn things over to Oscar for an overview of the CTLR. Oscar?
Thank you, Shannon. This is Oscar Gonzalez, the Associate Program Manager for the Financial Strategies and Research Unit, and I'll be discussing the Certification Transaction Level Report. Next slide. So the Certification Transaction Level Report, also known as the CTLR, is a proposed requirement for CDFI certification applicants. It's important to keep in mind that as of March 2020, there are about 1,100 certified CDFIs, and approximately 1/3 of those already submit, as a result of getting an award from the CDFI fund, their awardees, they submit a full transaction level report, or a TLR. So the CTLR will primarily apply to approximately 2/3 of certification applicants that do not receive awards from the CDFI fund. The CTLR provides a method to evaluate the extent to which certified CDFIs serve distressed areas and underserved population. And what this entails basically is understanding the geographies and also the populations that the certified CDFI serves. Using geocoded data, the CTLR will automatically determine if an investment is an eligible investment area or directed to a low-income targeted population. So there will be a service through our mapping system at the CDFI fund that'll automatically determine that, so that the certified CDFIs don't have to do that manually. It'll be an automated process. Data collected by the CTLR will include transactional reporting of new originations for the most recently completed 12 months for new CDFI certification applicants, and for the most recently completed fiscal year for certified CDFIs that are not CDFI or NACA program financial assistance recipient awardees. The CTLR supports the revised CDFI certification application and the ACR by replacing unverifiable summary information regarding lending and investments in target markets with transactional data. So in the current system, CDFIs provide aggregate information, but using the CTLR will really provide a more data-driven process. Finally, the CTLR data will be used to enhance the quantitative evaluation of certified CDFIs and CDFI certification applications, both internally, so that the certification unit can determine the level of impact and compliance with the CDFI's lending in terms of their target market, their eligible markets, but also for external stakeholders like the Congress that want to see the impact of CDFIs in these distressed communities and households as well. Next slide. The CTLR includes 11 data points to determine which loans and investments are deployed in a CDFI's target market, and allows batch coding. So a CDFI can use its loan processing systems to complete some or all parts of its submission. And it's important to note that these 11 data points, it's much smaller than the full transaction level report that has over 100 data points, only for CDFI fund awardees. So this is only maybe like 10% or around that compared to the full transaction level report. And CDFIs can use batch coding capabilities to take advantage of what is known as the low-income targeted population coding that will use census block data. So forthcoming from the CDFI fund will be a table and a system in our mapping webpage where CDFIs will be able to automatically geocode these types of transactions as low-income targeted populations. The CTLR also includes other data collection tables detailing the ACR for financial services and for loan purchases of the documentation. Next slide. The request for public comment and how to submit. Comments may be submitted to Greg Bishak, Program Manager, Financial Strategies and Research Unit at the fund via email at the following email provided in this slide. To view the request for public comment as published in the Federal Register or additional information related to proposed changes to the ACR or proposed introduction of the CTLR, visit the CDFI Fund website at www.cdfifund.gov. The Office of Management and Budget will issue an additional request for comment that will occur separately and subsequent to the Treasury Department's request for public comment. And with that, I'll pass it on to Greg for concluding remarks.
Thank you, Oscar. To the listeners to this PowerPoint presentation, I'd like to call your attention to the fact that the Federal Register notice details areas that we're interested in receiving comments on, but any commenter may raise other details than those points that we detailed in the Federal Register notice, but we're particularly interested in the estimates of the burden, the cost of implementing these, what the likelihood of the technological enhancements providing more efficiency in the data collection, the relevance of the data points. These are the things that we're hoping to glean comments for the public to, in an effort really to document the relevance of this to our mission and to maintain the activities of CDFIs at a level that's consistent with the statutory requirements that brought CDFIs into service. With that, I'll conclude our presentation and thank you for your attention. Bye-bye.